here's everyone you need to be adding off the waiver wire coming into week 7. I don't waste time. Subscribe if you do appreciate that as part of the channel. Also, hit that like button while you're down there. We have our like goal right here. It would help me out a ton as a creator. As we get into it, here's a list of players that should be rostered in 90% of leagues. First priority guys, if they are available for you, go ahead and make that claim as number 1. I want to accommodate for all league sizes, but I also have a list for you guys of defenses we can be streaming at the end of the video, so make sure to stick around for that as well. But Demario Douglas, we finally see a glimpse of light with Drake May in this offense. He comes out with 21 fantasy points, just shy of 100 receiving yards on 9 targets. He's also running a ton of routes as the Patriots' primary slot wide receiver, which is going to be very valuable to a rookie quarterback like Drake May, who likes to keep everything in front of him, and it will make him the safest player on this Patriots offense, which we do need when you look at it. But I mean, he was 3rd on the team in routes run with 28. He had a 30% team target share. I know the offense wasn't amazing, but with Drake May, it looks like we actually have something to look forward to now. I mean, with Brissett, this team was averaging 11.2 points a game on offense. In Drake May's first game, they get 21, and a pretty tough matchup against the Texans defense, all things considered. Demario Douglas is going to be an ad for me. As Drake May gets better and probably starts the rest of the season, these wide receivers are going to get a boost for any type of efficiency more than what Jacoby Brissett had. But next up, I will be covering Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. I had Watson in last week's video, and I was getting a lot of hate for it, but he comes out and shows a little bit of that success and why we had him in those videos. This guy's getting dropped in a ton of leagues. It just is what it is, which shouldn't necessarily be happening. He still didn't play a full snap count coming from his ankle injury. He did lead the team in receiving yards with 68, only on 3 receptions, which isn't the highest. We'd like to see higher, but he's shown us in previous years he doesn't necessarily need an insanely high number of targets to be efficient in fantasy football. That's also part of what the Packers do. The Packers offense is top 10 in pretty much every single passing statistic. But on top of that, we also have Dontavian Wicks likely to miss a week or maybe more with a shoulder injury. And Jaden Reed is dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury. He did come back into the game last week in week 6, so it's likely not anything serious. But that leaves Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson as 2 great options in this offense, especially considering we'll probably have Wicks out this next week. And they led the team in routes run with 30 and 27. But another wide receiver that might even be a higher priority than those guys is Michael Wilson, because Marvin Harrison is dealing with a concussion. Now this year, we've seen the trend of guys dealing with concussions to miss a game. We saw it with Malik Neighbors. Teams are just being a little bit more cautious with these things, and it makes sense. So there is a real chance that Marvin Harrison does not play this coming week against the Chargers, putting Michael Wilson as the wide receiver 1. And if you look at the numbers, you might be saying, where's Greg Dortch? Why is he not the one that we want? He had more targets. If you look at the underlying numbers, Michael Wilson actually played 55 of the 58 offensive snaps compared to Greg Dortch at 36, which led to 34 routes run for Michael Wilson and 26 for Greg Dortch. Now, that's despite Dortch having the higher target share. But more importantly, we are expecting Zay Jones to come back from his suspension and also kind of injury as well coming into week 6, which specifically would hurt Dortch a good amount because he plays in the slot. Zay Jones is primarily a slot guy. Now, he's played in the outside as well. He can do both, but Greg Dortch is the next man out as far as that role and wide receivers in this offense. Now, if we don't have Marvin Harrison this week coming up against the Chargers, Dortch will still have a role. But Michael Wilson is more of the alpha wide receiver. He is 6'4", he is a red zone threat, and a bit of a sneak peek into the stash video coming later this week. Zay Jones is going to be in there, so make sure you guys are subscribed to not miss that. But we also do want to be considering a running back here in Isaac Guerrero. The 49ers just cannot catch a break. Jordan Mason went down last week on Thursday with a shoulder injury. Turns out to be an AC joint sprain. It is considered day-to-day, so he could possibly play coming up in week 7, but if for whatever reason he does not, Isaac Guerrero is finding himself a place in this offense and probably can be started, because on Thursday he only had 10 carries but finished with 99 yards. Could have had a touchdown on top of that, but chose to slide and not get that to waste time and run the clock. Good decision by him. It shows his maturity, which honestly might get him a little bit more run. But more than likely, he won't get a ton of usage in the receiving game, so he's going to be reliant on those touchdowns. We saw in the beginning of the year, though, Jordan Mason can be perfectly fine in fantasy with that. Keep him on your radar if Jordan Mason does happen to miss this week. Now, I will be honest. Ty Chandler is an ad that we can look to make in this week 7. As the week has progressed, it looks more and more like Aaron Jones is not going to be good to go in this week coming up here, which it would be stupid not to give Ty Chandler a chance at that point. Jones is dealing with his hip injury. It's considered to be week to week at this point. Ty Chandler, only rostered in 30% of leagues, will be the RB1 if he does happen to miss. So we want to have him stored on our bench just in case that happens. Now, he will get a majority of the RB touches. CJ Ham will get a little bit of usage. Not really enough. He's the fullback. He's the only other running back they really have on this team. But Chandler runs enough routes out of the backfield and gets used in the receiving game enough to be a startable, viable guy. Even if they get a really tough matchup against the Detroit Lions this week coming, they are one of the hardest teams, one of the teams that allow the least amount of points to opposing running backs this year. We saw what the Dallas Cowboys were able to not do against them last week. They've been holding teams like that all year. If Aaron Jones does miss, it would be stupid not to try Ty Chandler out in your lineup. So pick him up just in case that fact happens. You can always use him as trade bait for a team that is dealing with a bunch of injuries and can't start a good running back. But a tight end for the second straight week in this video is going to be Cade Otton. For some reason, he's being rostered in well below 50% of leagues, which does not make much sense to me. He did see 6 targets, only 2 receptions last week, and a touchdown. The fantasy numbers were there, and you'd think, well, the Buccaneers put up 51 points. Cade Otton only had 6 targets. The target share probably wasn't good because there was so much scoring. But you look at the numbers, Baker Mayfield actually only had 36 completions. That's a very regular and normal number for him. So the 6 targets is still pretty good. Despite Otton only having 2 receptions, he continues to be one of the most involved tight ends in the NFL. If I just read out to you some of these numbers, he ran 37 routes against the Saints last week compared to every other tight end on that team with 2 routes total. On top of that, Otton is the tight end 5 in total routes run per game, the tight end 3 in route participation. He's 11th in target share at 20% on the year, clocking in at the tight end 19 in total targets despite his insanely slow start to the year, as you can see here. Like, those are all really, really good underlying numbers for Cade Otton. He's had this type of involvement last year, which is going to be very valuable in a Buccaneers offense that loves to pass and gets a great matchup against the Ravens this week coming, who are a top team in points allowed to tight ends. So I'm starting him as well. But time to my favorite part of the video, going over waiver wire defenses that can get us a win. A lot of the times, these defenses are the difference between wins and losses in fantasy football. So if you are looking for one, stick around for this part of the video. The Cincinnati Bengals against the Browns are the first here. This might cause some problems and some questions because the Bengals defense has not really been great outside of the Giants matchup last week, which is 100% true. They are definitely not the best in the league, but they get a matchup against the Browns, who are definitely not the best in the league either. Deshaun Watson is absolutely terrible. The Browns are allowing 5.5 sacks per game. Whether that's Deshaun's fault or the offensive line's fault, I blame it on both. It's still a fact. That's a really good fantasy floor for this Bengals defense. They also are playing the Browns, which are 8th in passing attempts on the year, despite Deshaun Watson not having one game over simply 200 passing yards. Like, that's not a hard number to beat. Still has not been able to do it. All of these receivers are risky. We saw in the backfield, Jerome Ford's injured. All of these running backs are getting, nobody knows. Nick Chubb's maybe coming back. Again, the Bengals defense isn't necessarily amazing, but defenses playing the Browns this year are averaging 10.8 fantasy points a game. But if that brings a little bit too much risk for you, which is real, you can go get the Saints defense, who do get the Denver Broncos. They're only rostered in 16% of leagues, and they're the defense 7 so far on the year. And they played really, really good competition in offenses against the Buccaneers last week, the Chiefs, the Falcons, Eagles, Cowboys, and Panthers. That's pretty tough. On the season, they've forced 15 sacks. They're 3rd in turnovers forced. And again, it's a great matchup against the Broncos, who don't let Bo Nix get sacked a ton, but he does turn the ball over a lot. He's top 10 in interceptions thrown this year. There is some upside. The offense itself isn't necessarily amazing, so there isn't a huge opportunity for them to be scoring over 20 points. Again, leading for more points to the defense on the Saints. We could also go through and grab the Bills, who get a matchup against the Titans here in week 7, who have a ton of issues on their own with Will Levis. And let me just get into some of these numbers for you. This man is the QB1 in interceptions on the year, averaging 1.5 interceptions thrown. He has a passer rating of 70.1 on average. That's good for the quarterback. 42 on the year. Like, that's enough of a stat on its own. I could show you guys so many more numbers on why Will Levis has been absolutely inefficient this year, but I'm going to save him and you guys the embarrassment and not do that. And the Bills have actually been one of the best teams so far this year in stopping wide receivers. If you need one more, you can also go through and grab the Rams, who get a matchup against the Raiders coming off their bye week, which is, again, a great matchup, especially if we have Aiden O'Connell playing in this offense. That is going to finish it off for this video, though. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the trap video of players we do not want to be adding off the waiver wire tomorrow. Do not miss that one. I'll see you there.